Springfield, Missouri, a peaceful town where people still believe tragedy only comes from accidents or fate. But inside the Stoute family home, something darker seemed to silently creep in. During Easter 2012, the father, Mark Stoute, 61 years old, suddenly passed away without leaving a will or last words. A few months later, his son Sean, only 26 years old, also died from a strange illness of unknown cause. 2 lives lost under the same roof was enough for people to call it a curse. Yet what made many shiver was not the pain of loss, but the survivor Diane Stoute, the wife and mother of the 2 victims. At her husband's memorial, she smiled, chatted cheerfully, as if hosting a birthday party without a single tear or a moment of silence. That cold and inexplicable behavior triggered the first suspicion among those around her. From that moment, a horrifying door gradually opened, revealing the chilling truth about a series of meticulously planned murders using antifreeze, a liquid usually used in machines, but now turned into a tool to take lives right inside the family. You are watching my channel where we explore the most mysterious cases and thrilling stories you may have never heard before. Today we will look into a poisoning case that shocked the whole country. And as usual, before we start, please hit like and subscribe to support us. Thank you very much. In June 2013, Sarah Stoute, the 24-year-old second daughter, suddenly fell ill and was rushed to the hospital. Her condition was critical seizures, coma, multiple organ failure. Doctors suspected poisoning but could not identify the cause. While the medical team was fighting to save Sarah's life, an anonymous call was made to the Springfield police. The caller was Pastor Jeff Sippy, the family's parish priest. He said, "I am a pastor and I have a parish family who lost 2 members in a short time. Now another is lying in the ICU. I have never seen anything like this." Although he requested anonymity, Pastor Sippy affirmed this series of tragedies was no longer coincidence and needed serious investigation. That call changed the entire course of the case. Pastor Sippy's suspicions were not unfounded. From when Mark Stoute, Diane's husband, suddenly died on Easter 2012, he felt uneasy. Mark was the lead singer of a local band. Although he drank alcohol, it was not enough to cause sudden death. This tragedy was concluded natural and no deep autopsy was performed. Just a few months later, in September that same year, eldest son, Sean, 26, also passed away. Although diagnosed with gastroenteritis, he received no specific treatment. This time, Diane didn't even hold a funeral for her son. What chilled the pastor and acquaintances was Diane's indifferent attitude. No tears, no signs of grief. She even behaved as if nothing had happened. When Sarah, the remaining daughter, nearly died for unknown reasons, he could no longer remain silent. Sergeant Neil McCamus of Springfield Police was assigned to the case. Although the previous 2 deaths occurred almost a year earlier, he still reviewed all forensic files and worked with the hospital to analyze Sarah's blood samples. At the hospital, doctors suspected Sarah was poisoned with ethylene glycol, the main component of antifreeze. It is a sweet-tasting chemical easily mixed into drinks, but metabolizes into acids, causing organ failure. Since it was not part of standard toxicology tests, this substance was overlooked in the 2 prior deaths. The police requested re-examination of the tissue samples preserved from Sean's body. The shocking result was that the tissue tested clearly positive for ethylene glycol. This made the police suspect that Mark also died in the same way. Immediately, Diane's family home was sealed off. During the search, they found a half-used bottle of blue antifreeze. Neighbors reported that Diane had used this solution in large quantities, claiming it was for car repairs. Continuing to interview acquaintances and hospital staff, the police discovered Diane's unusual attitude during the time Sarah was critically ill. A nurse said Diane only visited a few times, showing no signs of worry. She even smiled and talked about plans for a vacation to Florida. Although her daughter was still in critical condition, Diane showed no typical maternal reaction. The nurse noted that all these signs from the poison found in the victim's body, the evidence at the house to Diane's cold and ruthless behavior, led police to conclude these were not natural deaths, but deliberate, meticulously planned murders with antifreeze as the weapon. From an anonymous call by the pastor, The serial murder case in the Stauda family was officially announced. 3 victims were identified: Mark, deceased; Sean, deceased; and Sarah, surviving. The prime suspect was none other than the mother. As soon as there was enough suspicion of poisoning on June 22, 2013, Springfield police urgently arrested Diane Staude, 51 years old, and her eldest daughter Rachel Stout, 22 years old. Mother and daughter were taken to the station for separate interrogations. Initially, Diane appeared strangely calm, maintaining the facade of a grieving woman. She insisted that the family tragedies, from the deaths of her husband Mark's son Sean to the critical condition of daughter Sarah, were just a series of unfortunate accidents. Diane played the role of the pitiful victim, crying that she had lost her husband, lost her son, and now was about to lose her daughter. To add a pious touch, she even made the sign of the cross and pretended to pray in the interrogation room. Sergeant McCamus, who led the interrogation, had prepared a thorough strategy. He presented toxicology test results from Sean's biopsy, which clearly detected ethylene glycol, the main ingredient of antifreeze. Upon hearing this, Diane's tension became evident. Her complexion changed and speech faltered. Still, she tried to argue that someone might have poisoned her husband and son. McCamus continued pressing with undeniable physical evidence: the antifreeze bottle found at the house and the nurse's testimony about Diane's strange and unusually unconcerned behavior during Sarah's hospitalization. At this point, Diane clearly started to falter. After nearly 2 hours of evasion, she suddenly blurted out a sentence that made the room freeze. "To put it simply, I knew they had ingested antifreeze." That statement shattered the grieving mother act she had built. McCamus immediately pressed, "You gave it to them, didn't you?" Diane bowed her head and muttered, "I didn't know what else to do." From that moment, everything poured out like a long blocked flood. Diane began confessing her entire poisoning plan. In a cold tone, she described how she put antifreeze, a colorless, sweet-tasting liquid, into each victim's favorite drink, her husband's usual drink, Coca-Cola, for the children. First was Mark. During Easter 2012, he caught a mild cold and stayed home. Diane took advantage of this opportunity. She repeatedly brought her husband cold orange juice secretly mixed with antifreeze. Small doses over 3 consecutive days caused Mark's kidney failure and brain hemorrhage. Diane did not call emergency services when he had seizures, but just watched him suffer until he died. In the interrogation room, she coldly said, "At that time, I hated him to the utmost." 5 months later, on December 9th, Diane continued her plan with her son, Sean, who was diagnosed with autism and epilepsy. She confessed, "He always obstructed everything I did. He was more annoying than a bug." Every day, Diane mixed a little antifreeze with soda and gave it to Sean to drink for nearly a week. When Sean began vomiting, became weak, and showed signs of nerve damage, Diane did not take him to the hospital, but silently monitored him. She even recorded his symptoms to learn from them for next time. When Sean died, Diane staged the scene as if he had died from a seizure and persuaded relatives to cremate the body immediately to preserve her son's image. Next was Sarah, Diane's eldest daughter. In June 2013, Diane poisoned Sarah, claiming the girl refused to work and had a pile of student debt to repay. For 4 consecutive days, Diane and Rachel took turns mixing antifreeze into juice for Sarah to drink. When Sarah began to have seizures and body pain, Diane remained indifferent. Only when the girl became unconscious and started to emit a foul smell did Diane decide to take her to the hospital. Not out of compassion, but because she was afraid the house would smell bad. Later, Rachel confirmed this confession. After Diane's confession, the police began questioning Rachel. At first, Diane tried to downplay her daughter's role, insisting that she alone planned and carried out the acts. Perhaps deep down, Diane always wanted to protect Rachel, her most spoiled daughter. However, the police had enough independent evidence proving Rachel was an accomplice. They found many strange notebooks and poems in the girl's room. Among them was a poem ending with a chilling line, "Only the silent will survive. My mother, my youngest sister, and I." This poem was discovered in Rachel's wallet when she was arrested. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Rachel broke down. She cried and confessed everything. The mother and daughter had planned together to kill the father and older brother while also poisoning the sister. Rachel called her mother the mastermind while she was just following orders and dared not disobey. She said Diane called the plan a mission. Both of them had thoroughly researched poisons on the internet to avoid detection and deliberately bought antifreeze that had no bitter taste and was hard to detect by smell. Rachel was the one who prepared the poisoned drinks for all three victims. Although aware that their actions were wrong, Rachel explained she had been psychologically manipulated by her mother since childhood. Diane once told her, "If you don't obey, I won't love you anymore." The testimonies of Diane and Rachel completely matched. From the timing to the method of the crime, investigators now had the full picture. Diane, the mother and wife, was the cruel mastermind. Rachel, the obedient daughter, was the accomplice. The motive was both cruel and petty. Diane hated her husband because he was unemployed, spending all day playing his guitar without earning money. She hated her son because he stayed at home and did nothing useful. She also hated Sarah for being dependent and having student debt. When asked why she killed her family instead of helping them, Diane coldly replied, "They never helped me with anything. I just wanted to teach them a lesson." Besides psychological motives, financial factors also played a significant role. After Mark's death, Diane received a $20,000 life insurance payout, enough to buy a new decent house. Sean's death freed her from the burden of caring for him, and Sarah was seen as the final obstacle to remove so Diane and Rachel could start a new life. What began as a single poisoning escalated into a series of calculated poisonings committed by the mother herself. With irrefutable evidence, Diane Stout was charged with first-degree murder for Mark and Sean and first-degree assault against Sarah with the aggravating circumstance of using poison. Rachel Stouty was charged with 2 crimes: second-degree murder as an accomplice, but not the mastermind, and serious assault against Sarah. Both mother and daughter were denied bail due to the cruelty of their actions and the risk they posed to society. The case shocked the Springfield community, where everyone once believed Diane was a moral gentlewoman who sang hymns at church every Sunday. But behind that gentle face was a cruel, ruthless person who planned to kill each member of her own family. The case began to be peeled back layer by layer to understand what led to the tragedy in the Stout household. And the background behind the people involved cannot be overlooked. Who is Diane Stout, the mother accused of poisoning members of her own family? What kind of person is Rachel, the eldest daughter and accomplice in this cruel conspiracy? And why did Mark and the 2 children become targets? To clarify the true motive behind this tragic chain of events, we need to go back to the beginning. The Stouty family's life before the tragedy was filled with hidden conflicts, simmering pressure, and distorted relationships over time. All this created a terrifying picture where evil did not come from outside but arose from within close blood relatives. Before the tragedy, the Stouty family consisted of 6 people: Father Mark, Mother Diane, and 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. They lived in a modest house in Springfield, Missouri. On the surface, the family seemed harmonious, religiously faithful, and artistically inclined. However, inside was a network of simmering conflicts and repressed emotions that would lead to one of the most shocking poisoning cases in the country. Diane Stouty, born in 1962, was the family's economic pillar. She worked as a nurse at a school and also played organ at the local church. Diane's personality was quite reserved, but according to many accounts, she tended to be controlling and perfectionist. She was the only one with stable work and felt she carried too much burden while the other members did not contribute proportionally. In particular, Diane gradually developed prejudices and negative attitudes toward her husband and 2 eldest children, whom she considered useless and burdensome in her life. Mark Stout, 61 years old husband of Diane, was an amateur musician. He was the singer and guitarist of a band named Missing with Destiny. Mark did some odd jobs, but mostly stayed at home to take care of the children. Although not a heavy drinker, Mark did drink beer and was sometimes seen as lazy, especially in the eyes of his wife. He passed away on April 8, 2012, Easter Sunday, after a few days of fatigue and headaches. Doctors initially concluded that he had a natural stroke due to a history of poor health, and Diane described him as refusing to go to the hospital when he was sick. Later, Sean Stoughty, 26 years old, the only son in the family, was diagnosed with autism and several seizure disorders. Sean was dependent on his parents, often stayed at home obsessed with computers and music, but could not keep a long-term job. Diane frequently complained that her son was useless to the family. In early September 2012, just 5 months after his father's death, Sean suddenly fell ill after a few days of mild fever and was found dead on the bedroom floor with red stains around his mouth. However, due to his medical history and Diane's explanation that he had the flu for several days, Sean's death was attributed to complications from epilepsy. Diane did not hold a funeral for him, only briefly informing relatives. This made Mark's closest relative, his younger brother, suspicious that something was wrong. Sarah Stout, 24 years old, the second daughter in the family, was introverted, gentle, and had recently graduated from university. Sarah carried a large student loan debt and was still financially dependent on her mother. She had no major conflicts with the family, except often being scolded by her mother for not finding a job. In June 2013, Sarah suddenly vomited, experienced severe abdominal and back pain, and had seizures. Diane, along with the youngest daughter, took her to the emergency room. However, at the hospital, Diane's indifferent attitude towards her daughter's health caught the doctor's attention. After tests showed Sarah was poisoned by ethylene glycol, a component in antifreeze, the doctors immediately reported to the police. Sarah survived but was permanently damaged, losing her ability to move and think properly, requiring lifelong legal guardianship. At the trial, Sarah painfully recounted, "My mother not only took away my father and brother, but also stole my health and my independent life. However, she chose to forgive her mother to find peace in her soul." Rachel Stout, 22 years old. The eldest daughter was an accomplice in the entire poisoning plan. Rachel was a music student, played the violin, and appeared obedient and quiet. During the period of family deaths, Rachel did not show any unusual emotions. After being arrested, she confessed to planning with her mother to kill her father, brother, and sister, whom they considered lazy and destructive to their lives. A suicide poem was found in Rachel's wallet with the line, "Ultimately, only the silent ones survive. My mother, my little sister, and I." This reveals that Diane and Rachel planned for only the three of them to survive the silent ones deemed worthy of life. Brianna Stout, the youngest daughter, was only 9 years old when the case occurred and was the only one not poisoned. After the case was uncovered, Brianna was protected by authorities, given a new identity, and placed with another family under the Juvenile Protection Program. Many believe Diane and Rachel spared her because she was young, obedient, and not a burden. In summary, Diane Stout was the mastermind behind this shocking family crime spree, motivated by selfishness, coldness, and hatred towards her own blood relatives. She saw her husband and children not just as burdens, but cruelly eliminated them as if solving a problem. Diane fully fits the profile of a black widow, a term for women who kill family members, often for financial gain, such as insurance money, or to gain complete control over their lives. Meanwhile, Rachel Stout, the eldest daughter and accomplice, although actively involved, is seen by many psychologists as a tragic puppet controlled by a domineering mother. Rachel grew up in a distorted emotional environment, selectively spoiled by her mother, leading to warped empathy and the twisted belief that committing murder was justified. However, this distortion does not erase the fact that Rachel colluded in killing her father and brother, and this guilt will forever stain her remaining life. From being a mother, wife, and exemplary church staff member, Diane Stout gradually revealed herself as a cold-blooded killer who controlled everything in the family, like a tragic drama she directed. For years, Diane silently nurtured contempt towards her closest family members. When the opportunity came, she acted without hesitation. Each loss in the family was meticulously calculated, disguised beneath a veneer of morality and devotion, causing all initial suspicions to dead end. When the veil of lies was lifted, the Stout family story was no longer just a domestic tragedy, but a horrifying criminal case. The police had forensic evidence of toxins, and above all, Rachel, once Diane's right hand, had to confess the entire conspiracy. All that remains is to bring the case to light in court where justice will be served and the truth heard. The trial would be the final chapter not only for the series of brutal crimes, but also for the illusion of a seemingly normal family in Springfield. Shortly after the investigation concluded, Diane and Rachel Stout were charged and awaited trial. Initially, the Greene County Prosecutor's Office announced it would seek the death penalty for Diane as her crimes were classified as especially heinous, involving multiple premeditated murders and dark motives. For Rachel being young and a non-mastermind accomplice, prosecutors stated that if convicted of first-degree murder, she would face life imprisonment without parole instead of the death penalty. Facing the risk of a death sentence, Diane's defense attorney opted for a plea negotiation strategy. On January 20, 2016, at Greene County Court, Diane Stout agreed to a plea deal with prosecutors. Specifically, she pled guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 count of assault by poisoning Sarah in exchange for prosecutors withdrawing the death penalty request. Notably, Diane pled guilty in a way that did not directly admit guilt, but accepted there was sufficient evidence to convict. In other words, Diane did not say "I am guilty," but said "I agree to be convicted." This rare legal form showed she still tried to save face by not directly admitting to taking anyone's life. The judge accepted this plea and sentenced her to life imprisonment without parole. The sentence was divided as follows: life imprisonment for first-degree murder of Mark, concurrent life imprisonment for second-degree murder of Sean, and an additional 20 years for first-degree assault of Sarah. Despite multiple charges with life imprisonment without parole as the maximum penalty, Diane would almost certainly spend the rest of her life behind bars. In May 2016, she was officially incarcerated with prisoner ID 110408 at age 53. For Rachel Stout, the legal process was smoother due to her cooperation during investigation. In May 2015, Rachel pled guilty partially to testify against her mother. Under the agreement, she pled guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder, plus related charges, including conspiracy and assault involving Sarah. Prosecutors recommended leniency as Rachel was not the mastermind and helped solve the case. At the trial on March 1, 2016, Rachel was sentenced to 2 concurrent life terms for the deaths of Mark and Sean, plus 20 years for poisoning Sarah. Although the 2 life sentences run concurrently, the 20-year sentence follows consecutively. This means Rachel must serve a minimum of 20 years plus the time required before parole eligibility on the life sentence. Under Missouri law, second-degree murder allows parole after serving 85% of 30 years. Life imprisonment is considered 30 years. Thus, Rachel will not be eligible for parole until 2055, about 39 actual years after 2016, when she will be 65 years old. This sentence is seen as more lenient than the maximum possible, reflecting recognition of Rachel's potential for rehabilitation after serving most of her life. The Stout family case is not only a domestic tragedy, but also a mirror reflecting the dark side of humanity, when familial love is replaced by selfishness, control, and hatred. Outwardly, the family appeared harmonious: a mother working at the church, a father playing music, well-behaved children studying. But inside was a warped system where Diane operated everything like a cold dictator, categorizing family members as either valuable or burdensome. Her gentle husband, the mild patriarch, was despised. Her sick son viewed as a burden, while the talented eldest daughter was kept as a loyal assistant. All this was part of a cruel calculation. This is one of the rare cases where victims were gradually poisoned right inside their own home by blood relatives for very ordinary reasons: annoyance, fatigue, and simply not wanting to tolerate anymore. There was no clear financial motive, no mental illness factor, only indifference to others' lives and the rise of absolute selfishness. For this reason, many journalists called Diane the embodiment of the Black Widow, a woman who needs no knife or gun, only chilling coldness to take the lives of her own family. The case left many bitter lessons. First of all, It served as a warning bell about closed families where no one dares to speak the truth, as signs of dysfunction are ignored simply because everyone thinks the family is still fine. Secondly, it raises questions about indifference in the community when the church doctors and friends all suspected something, but no one took decisive action. And finally, the case makes us realize that evil is not always loud. It can quietly grow from the most familiar things: a contemptuous glance, a cold word, a prolonged silence. Justice has been served, but the price paid was too high. 2 lives lost, 1 permanently disabled, a young woman robbed of her future, and a mother ending her life behind bars. That family was shattered not by outside forces, but by those inside who chose to destroy it piece by piece, with hatred and apathy. What are your thoughts on today's story? Leave your comments below to join the discussion. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to keep following the most classic cases on my channel.